Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we're going to be talking about Corsair Voidreavers in 10th edition and how to use them effectively. So in 9th edition, Corsair Voidreavers were kind of like a pariah of the Codex. They didn't really have a great role to fulfill. They were good on their own, but they couldn't benefit from any buffs. So any army bonuses or psychic powers or anything like that, they could barely benefit from outside of their own Wayseeker model. And if you use the Wayseeker model to buff the Corsairs, you weren't using it to buff other units, as the Wayseeker model could not use his or her abilities on other models. Still don't know exactly what the gender of the Wayseeker is. If anybody does know, let me know in the comments. But yeah, essentially you could not make them any better than what they were on the datasheet. However, in 10th edition, this has changed. There is no more compulsory requirements, so your Corsairs can just be included in your army no matter what. You don't need to worry about, including troops and other things like that in your list. And also, they can be buffed by pretty much everything. The only thing that they lose is the army bonus, which is the Strands of Fate. They don't exactly have that ability, but everything else is fair game, including the detachment bonus of 1 reroll to hit and 1 reroll to wound. And I'm sure when our codex comes out and more detachments are available, these guys will also benefit from those. So yeah, Corsair Voidreavers got a big buff in my opinion this edition. And even though they're a little bit expensive, they are a good unit and they are worth considering. So without further ado, let us go ahead and jump right into it. So first, quick overview of what we're going to be looking at in today's video. We're going to be overviewing the stats, weapons, and special rules of the Corsairs, their strengths and weaknesses, their different combos and synergies, which they have a lot of now that they can be buffed, and the role of Corsair Voidreavers in an Eldar army and how to make the most out of them. As for their stats, they have movement 7, which is standard for Eldar infantry. They have a 4+ save, so just like a Guardian, and they have objective control 2. However, they do not have an invulnerable save, so they basically have the survivability of a Guardian Defender, which is very squishy. As far as their ranged weapons go, they have a variety of weapons, including blasters, shredders. The Fellar can be armed with a Neuro Disruptor, which is a pistol that wounds infantry on a 2+, but its trade-off is that it has AP 0. I think this is probably still worth just taking. It's free. You don't have to pay any points for it, so you might as well. The Blaster and the Shredder are straight from the Dark Eldar or Drukhari index. So you have the Blaster being a Strength 8, AP -4, damage D6 +1 weapon. With 1 attack, it does have the Assault rule, which is really good for this unit because all of its weapons have Assault, so that means you can advance and shoot. Again, this is very important because a lot of these weapons have a short range. So being able to advance and get that extra threat is actually really good. The Shredder is also a great choice. It has the Torrent rule, so it auto-hits. It has D6 attacks. It's Strength 6, AP 0, damage 1. So it's kind of like a Death Spinner, but instead of having devastating wounds, it has Strength 6 and it has more range. And it has the Assault special rule. So pretty solid option as well. I think both of those options are viable in this unit, unlike last edition where you were really only using the blasters. They can also be armed with a heavy weapon. If you take a big unit of 10, you can take a Shuriken Cannon or a Wraith Cannon. Shuriken Cannons being effective against infantry and Wraith Cannons being effective against larger targets, respectively. The models can also be armed with Shuriken Rifles, which are rapid-fire versions of the catapults. So, range 24, Assault, Rapid Fire 1, Strength 4, AP -1. So basically, think about a Shuriken Catapult, but has more range, and trades that out with rapid fire instead of having 2 attacks. So it's a little bit more versatile because of that extra range, and they also come with pistols. So if you don't arm them with Shuriken Rifles, they will come with the Shuriken Pistol and Power Weapon. Speaking of, the unit comes with Power Weapons, which have 2 attacks. It's Strength 4, AP -2, and damage 1. These are their basic weapons. This is what they start out with, which is the pistol and the power weapon. You can change out both of those for the rifle, however, which is how I personally like to run them. And as of recently, they were also armed with basic close combat weapons, which surprisingly have a lot of attacks. Corsairs have 3 attacks in close combat. Yeah, it's Strength 3, AP 0, damage 1. The attacks really aren't good, but you do get those extra attacks. As for their abilities, they have the Scout 7 ability, allowing them to get a better position on the board early, And they also reroll ones to hit, and if their target is within range of an objective, they get to reroll all hits. This is a great ability because this allows them to skirmish really well with other units that are on objectives, and they don't need the benefit of guide to be accurate when they're doing so. As for what they're equipped with, all models in the unit are now equipped with close combat weapons in addition to the shuriken pistols and power weapons they come with. So obviously, if you want to exchange your shuriken pistol and power weapon for a rifle, you won't be sacrificing your melee attacks. And I think it's pretty cool that Corsairs get extra attacks in close combat considering they're pirates. So it kind of makes sense fluff-wise, so it was kind of cool to see that they have 3 attacks apiece. As far as their other Wargear options, they have a bunch of options here. They can take 1 special weapon per 5 models, so that's either a blaster or a shredder per 5. So if you have a unit of 10, you can take 2 of these. If you have 10 models, you can also take 1 heavy weapon, which is a shuriken cannon or wraith cannon. And now there's no penalty for moving and shooting with the shuriken cannon, so that's also really cool. The Felarch can take a mist shield for a 4+ invulnerable save. Again, this is something you might as well take, but how often it'll actually come into play is very suspect. And I suspect it'll probably never come into play in most cases. All models can also have their pistols and swords exchanged for shuriken rifles, which again, like I said before, is my preferred way of running them, and I'll tell you why later in the video. But they can still be effective with power weapons and shuriken pistols if you want. As far as their unit composition, they can be taken in units of 5 or 10. They cost 70 points for 5 and 140 points for 10, making them cost effective when you consider all of their weapon options that they get. So obviously they have a ton of weapon options they can choose from, and if you arm them with those weapons, they are cost effective for what you pay. But if you don't, they're just simply not. So that is something to keep in mind when equipping this unit. As far as their keywords, they have the infantry keyword and they also have the grenades keyword. The grenades keyword being cool for the stratagem called grenades, which can be used to do some mortal wounds within 8 inches. That's pretty neat. They're also in Rathe. I don't know exactly if that applies to anything as of now. Definitely not, right? Because now in Rathe units can actually be taken in a Ynnari list, which is really cool. So I'm not sure it has any function for now, but it may have a function later on down the road. As far as their strengths and weaknesses, they have solid damage at ranged or in melee. They can scout 7 inches, giving them a good positional advantage on the battlefield. They have flexible weapon options. You can take blasters, which are good at, dealing with heavier infantry or even light vehicles and monsters. Or you can give them shredders, which are great against heavy infantry, and of course the shuriken cannon and wraith cannon as well if you have a larger unit. And they are decent in melee, even if armed with ranged weapons, because they have those 3 attacks. And on top of that, remember, if you're attacking a unit on an objective, if there's an enemy unit within range of an objective marker, they get rerolls to all their hits. And if not, they just reroll ones to hit, which is still pretty good. Their weaknesses are they're squishy and susceptible to Overwatch. And this is one of the reasons why I don't like them as a melee unit. But yeah, they are very susceptible to Overwatch. They do not have Strands of Fate. They've basically traded that in for a life of piracy, and they be after that booty, if you know what I mean. So being after that booty does unfortunately have its consequences. And lastly, without factoring in the weapon options, they are a bit pricey. So if you just want to equip them with their basic weapons, the price tag you pay is a little high for what they can do. For their combos and synergies, Vipers can remove cover from enemy units, making this unit hit harder against their ranged target. Most ranged targets sitting on objectives will have some sort of cover save, so being able to remove this is useful. Prince Riel can give them objective control 3, which is really strong when taking or securing objectives, which is really good as well. Yvraine can give them a 5+ feel no pain and can resurrect D3 models in your command phase. Personally, I think she's better with Harlequins or Voidscarred, but she is decent with these guys as well. These guys do have more objective control, so if you are going after units that are on objectives, these guys can be quite good with Yvraine. Remember that they are rerolling all hits against units on objectives, so they are more accurate than their Voidscarred brethren at doing that. The Vizarch can give the unit fights first. Again, not sure if that's really worth it on this unit. It's probably better in a Harlequins unit, but the option is available to you. And lastly, Shroudrunners can give their range attacks lethal hits, which is really good with Shredders. So if you want to make this an anti-infantry unit, You can give them the shuriken rifles, you can give them the shredders and the shuriken cannon, and that combination is actually really good with lethal hits. Otherwise, if you're going for the wraith cannon and the blasters, it's just not so great. So it just depends on your build. But if you do build them in an anti-infantry fashion, Shroud Runners are very good with them. And they also confer Scout 7 to any vehicle they embark in, allowing them to get into good positions much easier. Now, do be aware, though, that if you include a character without that Scout rule, they will lose the Scout rule for that transport. So just do be aware of that. They won't be able to do that with a character embarked on the transport. To my best knowledge, anyway. If anybody knows to the contrary, please, message me in the comments and let me know if I'm wrong on this one. The Falcon can also allow a small unit to reroll wounds. So if you're just going for a small unit that's maybe melee focused for some sort of defense, that can be a useful combination, although I think there are better options in the Codex personally. And a Wave Serpent can transport a full unit, but the Wave Serpent shield can't really prevent Overwatch effectively anymore, so that's also a bummer. As I believe disembarking from a transport does actually make the unit vulnerable to Overwatch. So let me know if that's not the case, though. I'm pretty sure I'm reading the rule right for disembarking from transports, as it does count as a unit moving. But again, maybe I'm wrong on that, and we'll have to recheck that. Okay, so what is the role of Corsair Voidreavers in an Eldar army, and how do you make the most out of them? So Corsair Voidreavers are a harassment and scouting unit that is designed to get to objectives early and skirmish with your opponent's scouts or objective grabbers. So your opponent will also be using the lighter elements of their army to scout, to grab objectives early, and to get board control. And what these guys do is they do the same thing, and they trade very effectively against those units. And to help them with this, they have a variety of weapon options good at neutralizing enemy light infantry or light vehicles. Blasters and the Wraith Cannon are usually enough to, just absolutely destroy things like land speeders, skimmers, things like that would want to get onto objectives early. And of course, the blasters are good at dealing with light infantry, things like scouts and other elements. And in addition to this, being able to reroll all their hits against enemy units in range of an objective allows them to operate more independently while maintaining decent damage. Again, you don't need to guide these guys necessarily because they already have a guide built in against their intended targets. Transports can help them get into better positions quicker, but for their role, they are generally not required. So yeah, you can definitely put these guys in a Wave Serpent to protect them and give them a better chance of getting onto an objective farther up the board. But it's not really required because they do come with Scout 7, and because they can advance and shoot their weapons, they're typically going to be able to get to mid-ground objectives during turn 1 anyways. As this effectively gives them an average of a 15-inch movement on the first turn, which is more than enough to get onto an objective in no man's land, or into some good cover. So then the question becomes, how do I take this unit? Do I take it in a minimum squad of 5, or do I take it in a maximum squad of 10? So I personally prefer the max unit because you get more special weapons. You get 2 blasters or shredders, and you get 1 shuriken cannon. Yeah, you could have 2 small units of 5 and they can both have a special weapon each, but you're missing out on that heavy weapon. And I think really the heavy weapon is what makes this unit worth its cost. Being able to include a Wraith Cannon in the unit or a shuriken cannon is a huge damage boost for the unit. And also, without that damage boost, they're a bit pricey just to take as a minimum unit. Again, without the special weapons. If you are just using them to grab objectives for cheap, the Rangers are a better bet. The Rangers are only 55 points, and the Corsair's minimum costs 70. So if you're just using them, again, to grab objectives and to, perform actions, you're better off using Rangers for that. And as for the melee variant, I have to say, Scorpions outtrade them significantly. If you're just running 5 of them with the power swords for 70 points, you're better off just going with Scorpions. They're better. They have sustained hits 1, they have devastating wounds, they have more attacks base. Yeah, you're just better off going with the Scorpions. Again, even with the power weapons, you only have 2 attacks with the Corsair Voidreavers, and you have 4 attacks with the Scorpions. Not to mention the Exarch also has a more powerful weapon as well. So, yeah, as far as that goes, I just think the unit is very cost and efficient. But as a shooting unit in a max squad, you're getting a lot of value out of those 3 special and heavy weapons that you can take. And just to give you some quick math on that, The Corsair Voidreavers will have 10 attacks for the unit, for their power swords. Scorpions will have 20. Scorpions also will have devastating wounds and sustained attacks 1, right? Sustained hits 1. So they're going to be not only producing more attacks, but more attacks that go through armor because of devastating wounds. And if that wasn't enough, Scorpions also are more durable, and they also have Infiltrate. So they're only 75 points, which is only 5 more points than the Voidreaver. So if you are running the melee variant, the only real way to run them so that they're still cost effective is to run them in a unit of 10 and still give them the special weapons. So still give them the blasters, still give them the Wraith Cannon, and so forth, because without those options included, they're just not a cost effective unit in any way. Running a unit of 10 with just power swords is objectively worse than running a unit of 10 Scorpions. It just is, right? So, yeah, I mean, you could just run them for fun, but they're just not good for the cost if you equip them that way. And that's why I think they're really in the best place as a 10-man unit equipped with their special weapons and heavy weapons, respectively. And as a ranged unit, they do have a lot of advantages over other aspect warriors. So, for example, if you would want to compare them to a contemporary like Dire Avengers, right, in the anti-infantry role. Dire Avengers are really good, but they often require transport, whereas these guys might not require one because they have scouts. In addition, Dire Avengers have an 18-inch range on their weapons. These guys have a 24-inch range. Even though you probably will want to be closer with these guys just because they do have more shots and more attacks when they are closer. They have the Scout 7 ability, so we'll be able to get closer to enemy units quicker as well. The other thing they have over Avengers is that they have flexible weapon options. The Shuriken Cannon and the Shredders or the Blasters and the Wraith Cannon are really good ways of dealing extra damage to light infantry or light vehicles and monsters. And Dire Avengers can't really do that. Even with their lethal hits, Dire Avengers will struggle to kill Toughness 8 models or above, whereas Corsair Voidreavers, because of the Blasters and Wraith Cannon option, will make pretty quick work out of those types of units if they're close to objectives, and even if they're not, you still get the benefit of Unparalleled Mastery, which means you can reroll 1 hit roll and 1 wound roll, and that can indeed be on the Wraith Cannon and Blasters. So that is something to consider as well, and when you put them, head to head, of course the Dire Avengers are going to win against most infantry targets, but the Voidreavers will have some flexibility in what they can target and what they can be effective against. Okay, so in conclusion, Corsair Voidreavers are a really effective skirmishing unit that can trade well with most lighter targets in the early stages of the game. And while they're not as cost effective in minimum units, in max units, they can punch pretty hard for the points, and they can get full rerolls to hit against units on objectives, which make them hit even harder with those weapons. Above all, they're super cool models, and they look fantastic on the table. There's tons of conversion options for them. They're just an awesome unit altogether, and there is something to be said about this unit being the first thing your enemy comes into contact with. So that is cool too. On the painting front, they're actually really fun to build and paint as well. And you can paint them a lot of different ways. So if you don't want to paint them like your normal Craftworld stuff or normal Aspect Warrior stuff, your imagination can run wild with this because there's so many different Corsair fleets that you can kind of just make it up as you go along. Which is what a lot of us do anyway, but it does kind of add to the immersion, Corsairs are pirates, they're free thinkers, they're treasure seekers, and they're going to have different looks because of it. And I'm just really glad that they're usable in this edition, because last edition it was kind of like pulling teeth to try to include them in your unit. There was all these restrictions around them, stuff like that. So I'm glad that there's a lot less restrictions to them in this edition, and they're also just much better in general. All right, everybody, that is going to be it for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you to all my patrons and supporters once again for supporting the channel and helping this channel grow. Your help is greatly appreciated. If you do want to become a Patreon member, I do have free trials activated. You can go ahead and try it out before you end up deciding to join or not. And all free trials and memberships will come with an invite to our Discord community, which is a community of Eldar players that like to talk about strategies, tactics, and of course, hobbying. We have a lot of new members, so welcome to all of our new members. And also, come join us. We love talking about Eldar stuff, and we would love to have some fresh perspectives on different strategies, tactics, and of course, hobbying. I do also have YouTube memberships enabled, so if you want to support the channel that way, you can definitely do so, and you will still get access to our Discord for free. You just need to send me an email, and I'll go ahead and send you the link. Lastly, I do have a channel store page with a bunch of Eldar-inspired apparel that you can look at. If you do want to rep your favorite faction in your local game store, come check out the store. There's tons of different Craftworld stuff, funny Eldar stuff, as well as Aspect Warriors and other units as well. So come check it out. I'm sure you'll find something that you like. All right, everybody, that is going to be it for today. Peace out. See you guys next time. Tomorrow we're talking about Void Scarred, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out, everybody.